All right, I'm just going to do a quick sound check before we start. Just want to make sure that everybody can hear me and that everyone can see my screen and see the Mozilla Open Badges slide. So if you could just post a note in the chat or in the questions. Okay, great, sounds like. So first off, thank you very much for joining us today. I know we have a few people that are starting to join, so I'm just going to do a really quick intro before I dive in. So my name is Megan Cole, and I run the marketing for Open Badges as part of the Mozilla Foundation. And today, basically, we're just going to take a walk through very much the general overview of Open Badges. So you should leave with some key points that you're fueled to, answer at the cocktail reception or wherever you are when someone mentions, what is Open Badges, that you'll basically have a little bit of a pitch and that you yourself can start to think about how Open Badges can ultimately be part of your sector, your community, or so forth. So definitely going to be a general overview today. I would encourage you in the questions section. I have all of the microphones muted just to make sure that you guys can hear everything, and the fact that we're recording this to make sure that you can come back at a later time. And so please use the questions section. I will be trying to monitor as I go through, but definitely we'll have time at the end to ask questions as well. It will probably take me about 35 minutes to walk through everything, so to make sure that we have an opportunity to. I will say that we will be circulating a link to the slides as well as the recording after today's session, so that will probably go out by tomorrow morning at the latest. So you can expect to get that as well, so that you can come back at any time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive in and just, overall, again, thank you very much for joining us today. So let's see. Okay, so for today's webinar, we're going to go through what is a badge, why Open Badges, a little bit of detail on what's called our OBI, so that's the Open Badge Infrastructure, a look at the current status of the ecosystem, so who's using Open Badges, and really what's next up for the Open Badges team. What are our efforts really going to be put in for 2014? So with that, as always, we like to do a little Twitter mention that as you're going through, make sure to follow us at Open Badges, and also if you're tweeting anything, to include the hashtag #OpenBadges. Also, really good to do a search for #OpenBadges. A lot of our community is really active with this hashtag, so just to kind of further get involved in what we do. So with that, diving right in. So what are the problems we need to solve? And I think this question could go across many things, but ultimately as it pertains to Open Badges, really we're in a state where education and workforce are changing. There's tension within both. Ultimately, what used to be you came out with a college degree, you would get a job, and so forth. It's just there's a lot of change that's going on here. This is a really good quote that kind of demonstrates that, where it's from one of the head of HRs at Google that is really basically saying that, just having a GPA and handing in a resume with that does not really do anything for them. They get over thousands of resumes a day. So ultimately they really are looking to know your ability to perform as opposed to just what you did in college. And so really looking for that complete picture of who you are as an individual, as opposed to just, I graduated and this is what I got, more or less. So tension, there's a high amount of tension between economic mobility, innovation, and access. And I think these are, really key buzzwords that I think are very apparent, whether you're in any type of industry, whether education and so forth, but really there's a lot of pressure going on. And so a good way to take a look at this is really to kind of dive in on a sector base, okay? So we're going to walk through probably about 4 different types of sectors that are feeling this economic tension and the need for mobility. And so K through 12, so current system is broken, dropouts, there's not a lot of people are ready for college, or even more so for career. There's some new schools that are exploring with personalized learning and competency-based, that idea of, connected learning, more or less. And sometimes, there's wrong accountability measures and wrong credentials. So a good user story here is Isabel, a 10th grader. She struggles with some subjects in school. She nets out to average despite doing many things well. She's involved in many activities, but there's no real way to keep her from falling behind, basically. You can also look at it from the teacher perspective. So you have Tawa, who's a 7th grade teacher. She must teach to test, and there's no room to innovate or attend individual needs within her classroom. And so it's really hard for her to ultimately connect with those students beyond just trying to have them take the test and get the grades to make sure that she's performing. So looking at after school networks. So, after school networks are very strong within the US, really kind of shepherding that time from after school until parents have the opportunity to pick up their kids. There's a ton of learning going on there. There's a lot of activities. There's different types of learning that aren't necessarily reflected in school. But because of that, it ultimately doesn't count. It's not connected to school. And so it's hard for, the individuals to actually legitimize that what they're learning because they see that it's not happening in school. So a good example of this is Eduardo. He's a 7th grader. He's a below average student in school. He's an emerging technologist and a mentor. But again, he just doesn't see that connection because it's not brought back to school where there's, math and science, that there is no connection to that basically at the individual level. So looking at higher education and university, so higher ed is expensive. It can be inconsistent. There's a really big growing gap between universities and careers. So people that graduate and ultimately, going out into the workforce and not being able to find a job. And there, there's ultimately a monopoly on credentials. And so really how do you help bridge that gap more or less? And so a good user story of that is Ahmed. He's a recent grad. Brings a transcript to a job interview and is surprised that this means little to the employer and that there's no way to demonstrate the skills and stuff. So beyond just going to school, there's no way to really capture, okay, so what identifies Ahmed based on me or based on someone else, more or less. And then you have workforce. So workforce is very changing. It's not always enough to have a degree. New skills are important and emerging, and it's hard for employers to find the right match. And so, people that are within the workforce, it's hard for them to really capitalize on all of the skills that they're learning while on the job so that it could translate to new jobs. And then on the employer side, it's really hard for them to find the right employees. So a good look at this is Sal. Sal's a displaced worker, does not know what skills he needs for a new job. University is just not an option for him, but there's no way to really demonstrate the skills that he's really learning here, and ultimately be able to transcribe and show those to a potential new employer. Joelle, she's a hiring manager, can't find the right people for the job. She's hired, the wrong people at several costs and really wants better tools for assessing what candidates can do. So how do you go beyond a piece of paper and beyond just having to call, basically recommendations that people have put and really get an idea that, ultimately has the evidence behind who you're dealing with. So these examples, I think they're just a very good way to kind of paint the fact that education and workforce is changing. And we'll come back to them in a little bit as well. But ultimately, just a good way to kind of get your feet wet. And so what this shows is that, no single institution can prepare someone. That really it's this idea of a connected ecosystem of learning. So connected learning in the sense of how do you really capture everything that individual's doing? And at the ecosystem level is how does it go even beyond that individual user? So there's this very strong need for credentials that capture and communicate this. So again, this is ultimately where OpenBadges comes into play. So really, OpenBadges at the heart is about reimagining credentials. But before we kind of talk a little bit more about OpenBadges, it's important to take a look at what are badges, more or less. And so as many of us know, starting off, so badges, there's a lot of definition behind it, but when you really, really break it down to the core, badges are digital representations of a skill or achievement. So that's, kind of a mouthful, but also very, very good descriptive of what it is. So it's digital representations of a skill or achievement. And now, badges aren't necessarily a new concept. They've been around for a while. And, one of the first examples might just be scouting. So Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, where it was about receiving badges based on, the different activities you were involved in and the skills. And ultimately it was shown with honor. People would wear it on their sash. My fiance still talks about all of his badges that he got. So it's definitely something that was ingrained to ultimately really show off the skills that you have, more or less. But ultimately, what we've seen is that more and more that these badges that were physical badges really started to represent achievements on the web. you know, a kind of an example where this surfaced or it really started to come out is Foursquare. For those of you that are not familiar with Foursquare, Foursquare is an application that's really based on your geolocation. So you can go and you can check into places. And ultimately through this, you can unlock different badges based on the activity levels. And so what this started off though is as much more as a fun or social thing. And so the benefit here is, you know, there'd be incentive to check into places because you'd get the badges. And then also the businesses could offer discounts or offer incentives basically. And it's also very social so that, you know, you can see where your friends are and so forth. And ultimately potentially want to go there. But these have more of a social status overall. So what we saw though is that increasingly, you know, the skills that these badges were showing off were becoming more real. And this is a great example of Stack Overflow. And this is basically just a developer community. And so ultimately, developers could go in, they could, you know, basically ask a question. It could be something as simple as, you know, I'm working on this new project in Node. I don't know how to do this specific thing, to something very in depth where here's my specific problem. Can you help? And ultimately, it has a very active following. Engineers were going in, they were responding, and what they found is that you could clearly get a picture of that individual based on their level of responses. So you could tell what type of languages they knew. You could tell overall their affect, their attitude. Were they a good you know, were they good at participating? Were they a good mentor and so forth? And so they created a very simple badge system. And this is exactly what their badge system had looked like is very simple to really try now start to capture all of the skills and the learning that were going on. And so again, it was really starting to reflect these real schools and or these real skills. And in reality, this is really what employers and schools are looking for. And so they saw the value in it and they created what's called Careers 2.0, where basically was the employer login that employers like Google and so forth could basically pay to basically be able to go in and search for these developers and see all of the badges that they've got. So be able to better understand their skill level beyond just a piece of paper, more or less. So it was really connecting the employers with actual real results, which is helping both the individual and the employer. So that, you know, kind of tells you, you know, what they are, but why basically. And so in addition to really you know, being able to capture that complete learning path, which was, you know, demonstrated in some of the sectors that we talked about of, you know, like the disconnect between after school and the skills on the job and workforce and actually getting a job. So it's this idea of capturing the complete learning path. And really being able to build and communicate your reputation and identity ultimately online. So how are you really capturing you as the individual and all of the knowledge that you have? So it's really about inventing or augmenting existing credentials that are granular, evidence-based, and transferable. And I think these are three, you know, if you could term them as kind of buzzwords, to really just keep in the back of your mind when you're thinking about open badges, is that it's basically they're granular, they have evidence behind them, and they ultimately are transferable. So really it's about surface skills and competencies that are important and give people a way to plug in. So an option to capture the 21st skills that are going on. So really painting that picture of you as the individual so that you can have the badges and share them basically across your social sites or across all of your online entities as a means to really build your online reputation. So what's even better is that it's not just a single badge, but this idea of a badge ecosystem. So this idea that an individual can get badges from multiple places that are not siloed, and then ultimately be able to connect or to collect them so that they can share them out for advancement or opportunities. So with that, so in order to create this type of ecosystem, it's not just digital badges, it's open badges. And so it's this concept and very true with you know, the Mozilla Foundation mentality is it's really about creating this open source environment that different people can plug in as a means to benefit the individual user. So let's take a look about a really good graphic sketch that was done to really start to visualize this. So you have a learner, a very cute learner with great glasses. And basically, the learner can get badges from all different areas. So, job training, online learning, volunteer program. And basically, she as the individual will be able to collect all of the badges from the different places. So, noting that they're not siloed. So, it's not that she can just get badges within job training and then they stay there, that she ultimately gets to take them back and save them in what's called her badge backpack. So, from her badge backpack, she has the ability to collect all of the badges. Within her backpack, she has the ability to share them out if she wants. She also has the ability to organize them. So if she only wants to make some public and some private, that's fine. And she controls her preferences. So if she wants to show them all or she doesn't. So in this case, she wants to show them all. So she shows them on her social networks. She adds them, she gets the code and embeds them onto her website. And then she works to build out a digital resume as a means to really show them off. So from these, basically these avenues, then she can use to help unlock advancement opportunities. So whether it's job opportunities, whether it's lifelong learning, or maybe it's even that she just realized that through some of the badges that she got, that there was potential opportunities that she didn't know about. So unlock this concept of pathways that ultimately kind of unlocks new opportunities for her as well. So with that, this is just the overall high level look at this. And so really where we come in and then what's called, the Mozilla's Open Badge infrastructure is building the plumbing. And so it's a very simple way to think about it, but it's ultimately we build the plumbing that basically from the top section of this graphic, so all of those, the job training, the online learning, through our APIs that they can ultimately create badge systems that then the user can easily share, easily collect and share from her backpack. And ultimately, it's the backpack that's really the home of all the badges that they're getting. So in a sense, we really create the plumbing to make this process happen. So, as very true to, again, the foundation of Mozilla, our APIs and our widgets and our backpacks are all free and open source. And so the beauty of this is the best way to think about it is we've basically built the foundation for you. So we've built the key plumbing things that you need, but ultimately you can come on top of it and customize it basically so for how it makes sense and how it resonates with your sector more or less. And so what we've done is, within the ecosystem, and so in addition to kind of creating that plumbing to make it all work, we realized that, it's really important to make sure that within the ecosystem that a badge is more than just a badge. It's not just a pretty picture, and I like to say that a few times. It's not just a pretty picture, because some people really get hung up on that. And although aesthetics is important when creating your badge system, really the nuts and bolts and what takes the most time is really diving into the ultimate criteria that needs to be behind it. So what we've done is we've come up with a set of things that need to be defined behind each badge. And so again, we've come up with the foundation, and this is a really great graphic done by a member of our community to kind of visually show this. But ultimately what we've done is come up with the key things that you as the issuing organization need to define. And so again, the beauty of this is that it's customizable, so that based on what you're trying to badge, whether you're trying to badge a course that you're offering, whether you're trying to badge an on-the-job type of training, whether you're trying to badge within a school system or so forth, you have the ability to customize it based on what you need. So, just with that, we've seen a huge increase in momentum on the topic of open badges. And I think at the core here is what people really realize is that there's this idea of connected learning. There's this idea of how do we move beyond some of the broken systems of the state and really empower people to capture their learning and ultimately be able to unlock possibilities. And so how do we innovate our ways of learning, teaching, and collecting while the world of technology continues to evolve around us? And so a year ago, we were at 98 issuers and 1,000 badges. Today, we're over 1,500 issuers and over 200,000 badges that are issued. And so there's been quite the increase in people that are really grasping onto this concept as a means to really try to connect within their platforms and so forth. And so with that, let's take a look. Who are some of these, 1,500 issuers, and ultimately how are they using badges? Water break. So I love to do this by taking a look at the stories again, because I think it's important to connect the sectors that we talked through in the beginning to actually who's doing things in motion. So you take a look at Isabel. So Isabel, again, 10th grader, struggles with some subjects, nets out to average, involved in many activities. She can get badges for all of her activities that she's involved in. Basically, she can get rewarded for granular accomplishments and strengths. She can use a combination of the badges to better understand and guide her, and she can even include the badges on her college application. So the badges really help curate that complete learning path and really capture everything she's doing. Same with Tawa. So again, seventh grade teacher must teach to test, no room to innovate or attend to individual needs, and no insight into the student's interests within the current platform. Give her some badges, and ultimately she can issue them for the skills and extra learning that's going on. So not by any means to to downplay testing, or to say that this is meant to overcome that, but more or less, how can it supplement it? How can you really define who that learner is by giving them more opportunities? So using badges as a way. And also from a teacher perspective, she herself could get badges. And so I think that, that's something important, that too, is that with the innovative trends, it's important that teachers are staying on top of it too. So how can even teachers continue to increase their learning throughout their lifetime and really be able to get credit for that? So a good example of through K through 12 is the Corona Norco School District in California. And what they realized is that their students weren't really motivated by A's and that badging coursework, and that there was really value in going beyond just the tests and the grades. And so what they've done is implemented a badging platform to really capture coursework, skills, attendance, and they called theirs the Passport program. That's ultimately kind of going with you all through K through 12. So the goal is to complete your passport, and then ultimately they're working with local colleges as a means to kind of help with the college application process. So this is just an example of kind of the login, and then just to show off kind of some of the badge types that they did. And so in addition to, having the badges within the classes, there's attendance badges, behavior badges, that they took specific tests like SATs. And so it's really about showing off everything that they're doing as opposed to just getting a letter grade. So going to after school stories, so Eduardo, seventh grader, below average student in school, again, emerging technologist, but just doesn't understand that this is legitimate learning because it's not connected to school. So badges will really help capture that learning, and they can unlock different possibilities, within mentoring, and he can carry them back to school and share them with his interests, especially teachers, so that they have a better understanding of probably how to reach him, and ultimately that empower him to feel like he is a good learner and that he is learning more or less. A good example of this is the Providence After School Alliance. And so they basically implemented a badge program for kind of expanding learning opportunities. And they've done a lot of work to help connect with their after school program with the schools and local businesses. And so they have programs on environmental science, sports, video games, and basically the local high school and community college accepts those badges ultimately for credit. And so they've done a lot of work of not just building a badge system within the Alliance, but really working outside of that to kind of build more of an ecosystem to make sure that it connects for the individual user. And so they have badges from all different things, from being an intern, being on a debate club, and so forth. And so really trying to capture all of the skills that they are basically teaching and ultimately helping further within the after school network. I will say that there's a big interest coming out of this as well, given that there is a very, very strong after school network even all throughout the U.S. of how can you use badges. And so we're in talks with a lot of the after school networks to really kind of further this along. And then, there was a White House Google Hangout earlier this year in which one of the students that went through this program spoke to how badges influenced him. And it was actually really powerful. It was, talking about how he, came into the after school network, and when they mentioned the concept of badges, he was a little unsure. It was like, sure, I'll get a badge for that. But then really started to see that it showed him more of his interests, and it was able to unlock potential new things for him. And then ultimately, he was able to use that to get into to college. And so it was a really great story as well, to kind of show that how it really is working to connect and help the individual level. So university, so Ahmed again brings job transcripts, surprised that this means little to his employer, and that there's no way to demonstrate skills or granular learning. So badges can ultimately help him capture who he is and everything that he's done, and give him the opportunity to share it on a digital resume and a prospective employer. So it tells his complete story, so that he has differences than the other person who just threw their resume down from the university and so forth. And so that it really is more just beyond the classes he took and the grades that he got. So, a good example, Purdue University. So, within one of their graduate programs, they realized that there was this really big disconnect between going through the specific courses that were isolated as part of the program, but then all of the extra things basically that they included. And so that's labs, that's group projects, that's internships, and so forth. And they realized that, on twofold, on the student's perspective, it was really hard for that student to show off that they were doing all of that. But then on the teacher perspective, it was hard for them to know everything that the student was doing, more or less. And so they created a badge platform. And again, they also called this a passport program that captured all the skills and learning that were going on outside of the classes. So they still had the same curriculum, but they implemented the badge system around it. And so this is just an example of, as the instructor, you had a really easy way to basically pull in and create your badges if you had new things that you wanted to badge, or ultimately to be able to figure out what made sense for your classes. And then the students could ultimately get rewarded of these badges based on their performance or their activity levels, and then be able to collect them. And so, this is just a good quote, and I'm not going to go through it in full detail, but from the Vice President of Information of Technology, was just really hitting on the fact of what I said, is that there was so much going on within these graduate courses that they just did not, there was no complete picture. And that ultimately the Passport app that they've created gives faculty and advisors another way to recognize and validate those skills for the student, and then gives a way for the student to really show off everything that they've gotten within their graduate program. And I will say that they've seen so much success from these initial pilot projects that they're actually looking of how they can embed badges even further into the curriculum to complement what's going, as opposed to just capturing everything on the outside. Another good example is open education. Within open education is called Code School. And so there's a good amount of these that have popped up that are, really about online courses to further specific skills. And I think engineering is an important one to call out, given the fact that a lot of today's engineers, software engineers, are self-taught. And that's because, there's always new languages emerging, there's always new things. And so even if they went through formal education for software engineering, that really there's this constant learning path. And so a lot of times you have people that are applying for jobs that as an employer, you're not surprised that person says that they were self-taught and so forth. And so this, Code School was one that was working with a lot of developers to improve their skills and teach new ones. And so they implemented badges again so that that individual could really show off what they do. And again, remember, the badges are evidence-based. And so what that means is if I get the, Ruby Path badge, that when I put that on my resume or my digital resume or on my website, that the employer can come see that, click through and see what the evidence is behind that. So see why I have that badge, more or less. Two more examples to throw out here that I don't have captured in slides, but I think it's important to note is that, the increase in the MOOC classes as well is been over the last few years and is at an all-time high. And so we're working with many of the platforms to use badges to capture that as well, given the fact that a lot of times the thing you get after completing a MOOC is a PDF certificate. And so we've been working with some of those platforms in general to really implement badges. And we had our first MOOC this year using the Blackboard platform, and we issued badges for that as well. And so definitely an increase of that. In addition, we've seen that there's an increase for universities to start to think about how they can use badges within acceptance. So DePaul University announced in June of this year that they were really going to start to implement a plan and work with it so that students, when they applied for college, could include their badges. And that from that, based on the certain badges that those students came in with, they ultimately could use them to skip some intro classes. And so just some ideas of different ways that universities are ultimately working with badges. For the workforce, so again, Sal, displaced, doesn't know what skills he needs for the new job, has no way to demonstrate his existing skills. And so, he can get badges for everything he already has. And so view badges, for a particular industry. And so ultimately open, different pathways to see what opportunities are there, and then be able to, again, show off the skills he's getting on the job. So a good example of this is Manufacturing Institute. So it's an organization that's, again, really dedicated to connecting employers and the individual workers. And so they've implemented a badge system that's really about using badges to define the skills that are important to the industry. So they go out to the employers and say, okay, what skills do you need for this specific job? And then from there, they help back out a badge system that so that when an individual comes in and starts earning badges, that those badges can unlock different opportunities so that they end up at the end job. So it's basically a win-win for the people that are going through the system to earn badges, and then connecting them with a job at the end, and the employer getting exactly what they need. So it definitely just ties right in. And so this is just a quick example. So again, from the student perspective, you're getting badges as you're developing new skills and you're involved, and that ultimately you get potential recommendations of other badges you could unlock. So ultimately, how could you how what new possibilities lie through each badge that you get. And then from the manufacturing perspective, again, you're getting the talent that you need. You're getting the people with the skills that you've defined are needed for that position. This is another example, and I apologize, this slide, you need to bust out your magnifying glass for this one, but we'll make sure you get the deck so you can take a little bit further of a look. But so again, Workforce IO, same concept, really used badging. And so this is an example of their selector packer type of role. So basically they broke out all the key things that are needed in order to do this, and so that the information behind the badge that you get when you're able to do that and so forth. Another good example here too, just to verbally discuss, is veterans. And so a lot of times there's been an increase in veterans getting a lot of on-the-job training when they're in at war, on the ground, and so forth, and then coming back home, and this disconnect of getting jobs because they've dedicated most of their time to really being in the moment and learning those tasks. And so there's been a big influx of this interest in using badges for vets, and there's been a few programs. The manufacturing organization has been working with it, but then there's been another one that popped out called Badges for Vets, and really it's that concept of how can we show off the skills that all of the veterans have got, and then directly connect them to jobs. So just a really good fundamentally really about improving and helping lives through this concept of badging. Also, again, so take it from the employer side. And I think, the employer side is a really big piece that we are really researching right now, as there's a lot of value from there, because it's a win if you know exactly what the employer wants, because you can help make sure that you're guiding people in that direction. So you're creating pathways for them there. But, just some examples of the employer piece. And so again, Joelle can't find the right people for the job. It's been costly. So she ultimately could search through candidates of badges. So use the information, so again, the evidence behind the badge, to really easily vet the candidate skills. And again, the information that's behind the badge is set up by the issuing organization. And so you get questions sometimes of how are badges valid and so forth. And that really lies on the issuing organization to make sure that there's integrity in their system, so that when they're creating badges, that there's a reason of why they're creating badges, and that it ultimately shows off something that the learner gets. And so a good example, again, Careers 2.0, which I mentioned in the beginning, based off Stack Overflow's badge system, is that people can go in, employers and can go in and ultimately really get a good overview of what those individuals do, and see the badges that they have. Another one is Mozilla. And so a big reason of why we really got interested in the concept of open badges a while ago too, or why Mozilla got interested in is again, they were looking for really good development talent. And so they, being a technology site, really needed strong engineers, and struggled to find them, especially just because, again, a lot of engineers are self-taught, or aren't, there's not a really good way to demonstrate the skills that they have without having them go through multiple tests and so forth. And so really use badges as a way to help with that from an HR perspective. So that kind of walks through all of the different sectors and just gives you a taste of all of the different issuing organizations. I will say that we're doing a lot of efforts, and tease on this a little bit more at the end, but the goal of 2014 is that there will be a good, easy home for you of someone who's interested in creating a badge system to be able to visually see who else is doing it. And so right now we have lists off our website of who's doing it, but this concept of being able to go no matter where you are in the world. Let's say, you're in the UK, but you'd easily be able to go and see who else in the UK is working with Open Badges, and ultimately how are they working with Open Badges. We're also doing a lot right now to build up some key case studies, so that we can really start to surface some of the best practices, both benefits and challenges within issuing a platform or issuing badges, so that new people really have a good groundwork. But with that, I want to give you a little background on one of the biggest projects that we worked on this year, to kind of just show you how a badge system can go beyond just offering a few badges within your classroom or so forth, and really just kind of building this concept of the overall badge ecosystem. And so the Chicago Summer of Learning was a project that we worked on. I think we started in probably about mid-February, March timeframe, and launched right before the summer. So it went pretty fast. But basically, it was about how do we leverage 8 weeks. So one summer in the city of Chicago that was initiated by the mayor's office. And basically their primary focus was to address summer dropout. And so that they knew that they had a big disconnect of people that were in school and leaving school in the spring and then coming back into the fall, and teachers being frustrated because they had to, the students didn't do anything over the summer, or there was no way to see what the students did over the summer. And also, the city of Chicago has its areas of poverty, and the areas where there, was increased in I don't know, crime and so forth within those months where students were in school. And so, and even in some cases that you'd have parents who would drop kids off at the library, and that was considered daycare. And so again, this idea of how can we mobilize the city to really foster a collaborative environment and really help these students and individuals throughout the summer months. So basically, their main things from the governor's office or from the mayor's office, his primary focuses was this concept of STEAM, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And what we did is we teamed up with some members of the city, and really helped them think about, okay, how do we create this ecosystem? And so we worked with over 100 organizations, and there was 3 core team members on the ground in Chicago that were doing this. And basically what we did is we worked with um, each organization to help them determine what badges made sense for their activities. So this could be museums, this could be the parks, this could be the libraries, all bunch of organizations across the city that ultimately were offering initiatives or summer initiatives for students, basically, and created this badge system that ultimately the individuals could come in, see about new badges, but they could also earn badges when they were in those environments and so forth. And so I have a really great video. I'm not going to play it just because sound quality hasn't been the best when we're doing these recordings, but I'm keeping it in here because when we circulate the slides, I would encourage you to go back and take a look at this, because it's about 1 minute and 42 seconds of really diving in from the student perspective of what badges have done. So just a really good way to kind of visualize what I'm talking about. But I'll continue to talk. And so here's an example of the different types of badges. And again, it was across multiple different organizations, and it was really based up to that organization to really define what they wanted to badge, more or less. And where we came in with this project is that we really helped build the infrastructure. So beyond just our APIs, a project of this size needed its own website. It needed its own back end where people could come in and approve the badges. And it also needed an opportunity to be able to reach students that were under 13. And so dealing with certain legalities and so forth is, how do you reach students that aren't necessarily of age and that need parental acceptance or approval to be engaged. And so we helped build a bunch of these tools to really solve this. And within the badge system too, what we did was we worked with all of the badges that we got from over the 100 organizations and really helped create this badge like leveling up system, more or less. And the concept here was it was trying to create in engagement throughout and give people the opportunity that once they get the first badges, they could realize what next badges they'd need to get to level 2, to level 3. And ultimately the final level was to unlock the city mayor's badge, which would give you access to the closing summer party, which there was, I think some famous people there, and it was really the demo. So it was this idea of how can we continue to encourage engagement throughout the entire summer. So overall, I would say, it was a very successful summer. We had 23,000 learners that went through the 8-week program. Over 110,000 badges were issued. And ultimately, we basically created this concept that's really growing. And so the idea now, and you'll see if you check out the Chicago Summer of Learning, they've actually done some work to kind of tweak their logos and so forth, because their idea was that it doesn't stop in the summer. Like, why can't we do things in the winter break and so forth, and just really keep this momentum of connected learning outside of the school system that feeds back into the school system, so the students could go back with their badges in the fall, and the teachers would know what learning's gone on. It could unlock different opportunities, it could unlock internship opportunities, and so forth. And so again, it was just this concept of how can we mobilize all of these different organizations with one foundational goal, which is really this concept of connected learning and helping the individuals by bettering their lives. And so overall, just a really good example to show. And again, not every badge system is this detailed and so forth, but just really a good idea to show the power of actually what it can be. So just in summary, so really open badges are digital credentials for the modern age. They're evidence-based and verified. They're really about recognizing skills and achievements. So how do we recognize all of the skills and achievements that fall outside of the traditional ways of recognition, and help and empower that individual to collect it across their lifetime. So build up a portfolio of what you do and know, and ultimately carry that, so that digital currency with you across the web. So how do you put it on your different profiles, and really start to create, in addition to just straight your own, I did this or I'm good at this, like how is there validity behind it? How are you really showing it off, and so forth. So with that, I will just give you a little tease of kind of some of our key initiatives based on some of the foundation that I've talked about. And one in particular is this idea of badge kit. And so you just heard me talk about City of Chicago, and you heard me talk about all the different tools that we had to create. And what we realized is that there's a value, a very big value, in really packaging those tools so that they're easy for anyone to come in, whether you're a city, whether you are a big organization, whether you are an individual teacher within a classroom. And so what we've done is we are in 2014, probably right around March 2014, we're getting ready to launch this idea of Badge Kit. And Badge Kit will basically be all of the key fundamental tools that you will need to get up and operational with your badging platform. So again, this could be one badge, this could be multiple badges, but really it's so taking from today's conversation and ultimately defining, and helping you, guiding you through what's next. And a big reason what we realize is that there's this gap. There really is a gap of us having a conversation today. And we're always here. I'm going to go over the channels of how you can reach us in just a minute. But really kind of helping you go to the next step. And there are some community-driven platforms for sure, but a lot of what we found is that they were either a lot of the community ones weren't as free, and they were starting to get more siloed. So our concept is build the foundational tools that then people can still come in and plug and play off of them. And you as the individual can choose which tools that you need. So maybe you only need the issuing tool, or maybe you only need the building tool that helps you design the badges, and that you're working with another issuing platform. And so again, the concept of these is they will be individual standalone tools that you can use by themselves, or you can use as a whole. And so again, this is coming in March of 2014. And so we're really looking forward to this, because we think it's definitely something that the growing ecosystem needs. In addition, this idea of badge the world. And so part of this is kind of a campaign, but in reality, our goal of this really becomes the home for you as the community. And so ultimately you can go and you can isolate down to whether you're in a specific state or whether you're in a different country, and see who else is doing it and get a little profile of their story and what they have, so that you can ultimately, maybe you want to contact them, or maybe you want to just read up on them and see what they did, as a means to really kind of help you take the next step. And where this concept was born is there's a great program by an amazing company called Digital Me in the UK that's really leading the way on open badges and implementing open badges within school systems. And they came up with this concept of Badge the UK. And so it was really getting people to commit to working with badges. So that could be commit to issuing badges, commit to researching badges, and so forth, but getting them to take the commitment that they will take the next step. And so at a recent event we had a big map up that people could could come, and there was over 1,400 people at this event, and they could ultimately, literally physically write out what their commitment was and post it on this map. And before you knew it, we had this plethora of people all across the world saying that they wanted to work with badges. We had someone come up that said they wanted to badge, India, like, really look within a lot of their systems and so forth. And so again, it's this, the thought of this is it will ultimately be integrated into the Open Badges properties, but really be a home for you as an individual, as an organization, to ultimately come and make the commitment to work with badges, and then be able to easily see who else is going to work with badges, more or less, or who else is working with badges, as a means, again, to really build this ecosystem, more or less. So with that, I have gone a little bit longer than I anticipated, so about 45 minutes of your time. I like to just throw this up, and again, you will have these slides so you can have this information, but these are really good ways to connect with us. And so again, being open source, we work in the open, we talk about things even before they're fully baked, and the reason why is we have a very active community, and what we do, we want to be driven by our community. And so here's a good ways to plug in with our community. And so first of all is the community call. So this happens every Wednesday at 12 p.m. This is very good for new people. It's a general call. And basically the idea here is that there's different speakers that are featured every week that are talking about how they're working with badges. So again, this is all different levels. This could be an individual teacher. This could be a bigger organization, really talking about it. It's a really good time to ask questions specifically to the team. So most of the team is on the full time. And so that you really have an opportunity to connect for a full hour where you're asking questions in line. And it's a good opportunity to see what's going on with the ecosystem. Again, this is pretty high level. And so even being new, we welcome you with open arms. And it's just really about, getting your feet in a little bit deeper. In addition, we have a Google group, and this is very active. And again, this is a really good place, even if you have questions that you don't want to wait till next Wednesday, you can post in the Google group. It goes to pretty much everyone on the Open Badges team, but it also has a really big following across the community as well. Oftentimes you find very general things in here, and sometimes you find very detailed. It's purely based on what it is. Also our blog. So we have a great blog, a Tumblr. Jade, who's our program coordinator, is fantastic. She's really good at not only letting you know what the team's doing, but really capturing what's going on in the ecosystem. So who else has just issued badges? And really, she does a great digest every single Friday to kind of keep you up to speed on what's going on with that week, knowing everybody's pretty busy and there's a million sites to be looking at, but really just definitely something to add to your reader or whatever. And lastly, email. So we're always available. So our email at badges@Mozilla Foundation, that's connected to all the key people who can provide you with the answers you need, whether it's technology, whether it's general, whether it's partnerships and so forth. And we are here. That's our job at Mozilla, again, is we have the tech side of the team who's really about building the foundational tools. And then you have us that's more on the community driven side of the team that's really about having conversations like today, speaking the word of Open Badges and really listening in, keeping a pulse on our community so that we ultimately can make sure that we're providing the foundation and the education that you need to really work further with Open Badges. So with that, I want to first off thank you for listening to this. It's always great to walk people through this because I think there's just a wealth of information. I'm going to just take a quick look through questions and just give people a question time. If you have questions, there's a little great question feature in the GoToWebinar control panel. If you would like to type in questions, I'll save a few minutes to go through and answer them. As always, again, we're always available. You can reach us at badges@Mozilla Foundation if your question is more on a personal level. We really like to do this intro webinar, again, just to give you a general basis. If you would like to touch base with us to really just talk about your individual platform or your individual sector, or even just bounce ideas off, we're always available for that as well. So again, you can just ping us at badges@mozillafoundation.org. But overall, that's it. I mean, again, there's a wealth of information to digest. So I hope that this was beneficial today. And we will make sure that you get a copy of the slides, by tomorrow morning at the latest, and a link to the recording. so that you can share it with other people within your team, or just take another digest when you have a little more time. So with that, I'm going to pause talking a little bit and just take a moment. If people have questions, um, please feel free. So it looks like we have one question. Um, so we have this is a great question. So we have a great question saying, I'm curious about the technology background that someone would need to create these badges. I'm working with a smaller organization and I'm not sure where to begin creating these or the background knowledge I need. It's a very, very great question. So this is a big reason of why we are creating Badge Kit in 2014, is really to help you with things like this. And so, we always say that some technical skills are needed in order to do this. But there are a lot of tools that already exist out there. And so there's different community-driven platforms that can help you through the full process. And then if you think your timing is more in the beginning of next year, BadgeKit is going to help you with this. And what I mean is that there'll be tools very similar to the Purdue Passport program that I just showed you, where you can log in and easily design your own badge by pulling in a graphic and so forth. But there are some really great community-driven ones that exist today. And so we'll make sure in our follow-up email to go ahead and just pop in a link to a chart that the community has created that kind of goes through a lot of the tech resources that are available in case you don't have a tech person or you are not have access to a designer. So I think it's you can take a look of what's existing out there, but then also know that if your timing is in the beginning of the year, that we're going to be coming up with the free version of things to kind of help through this process. But great question overall. And I think that's one of our biggest goals is to make it as simple as possible to kind of help you go from the idea conception to really the next steps. I will say that we have a 201 webinar where I start to dive in a little bit to system design. And so I mentioned today that badge system design is probably the hardest piece, so even harder than the design and the technology piece, which actually given tools is pretty simple. But badge design is really thinking about, okay, so what makes sense for my sector? And when we encourage people, that it's great that if people say, oh, I have this course, I want to badge this, that's great. We encourage you to do that. But we also encourage you to think further along. Do you think you'll have additional courses? Do you think that there might be an opportunity to have more than one badge with a course and so forth? So how do you really start to think of it from a system perspective? And we recently just did a webinar on that too. So we'll make sure to include that link in case you want to take a look at that as well. But great question. Thank you. So looks like so far we're just getting everybody saying that no questions. This has been really informative, which is great. That's our goal. Also a great question. So are there common badges in specific fields? So to date, most of the badges have all been directed by the individual issuing organization. What we are currently working on is this idea of pathways. And so really helping to work with specific fields, so healthcare, more of a manufacturing type of field, to come up with this concept of are there core badges that can be used across. And so this is something we're definitely exploring. Right now, most of the badges are basically up to the issuing organization, but it's definitely something that and even the head of our badge system design has been leading exercises on this topic of can you create some type of core badges that could be replicated across different type of issuing platforms. And so more information I'd say to come on that. As of today, I think the very first instance that we're going to find is that a lot of the cities are really interested. We have about 9 to 10 cities that are interested in doing the Chicago Summer of Learning program. And a lot of them would be kind of working off some of the same type of commonality between their badge systems. But that's all a little bit in the research phase right now. Any other questions? I'll just pause for just about an additional minute or so to see if anybody has anything. All right. Well, it looks like we have a quiet group, and that's totally fine. As always, again, please, do not hesitate to reach out. I highly encourage you to dip your toes into some of our community-driven channels. Again, even if it's just passive, if you want to learn a little bit more, really, really good opportunities. And at the very least, check out our blog so you can read a little bit more about what's going on. Just really good ways to help you connect, to feel part of our community, even at the very initial research type of phase. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It's been really great. We will, again, make sure we've got your email addresses through the sign up form. So we'll make sure to circulate this, and then we'll also post it on SlideShare and on Twitter so that you can always come back to it as well. So with that, thank you. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the week and has a lovely holiday season that is upon us. And we look forward to having you as part of our community. Thanks, everybody.